Hello, all. This is AndY, and you are listening to or watching the Bible reading series. We will be starting in Exodus 1. This might be a little longer video than normal because I have a little bit of a disclaimer on this one here to start off with. But let's begin with the Lord's Prayer here, Matthew 6:9 through 13, King James Version. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. I'm going to start this one off. I did this a little impromptu, because I was just kind of getting my feet wet when I did Genesis. I'm going to try to be a little bit more formal with my disclaimer. I'm sure that I'm going to have to revisit Genesis 1, and this is going to have to be a little bit of a living document, because I'm going to say that I'm attempting things, and I'm probably not going to meet my own standards. However, I'd like to at least set the goal here, set my aim. So, temporary disclaimer. Who am I? I'm a layman. The only accreditation is I do have an associates. That's it. So I have my generals, but I'm what I will classify myself as a simple man, in the sense that I am not accredited by anyone in a particular academic endeavor. So I cannot be looked at as someone who is, ordained. I do not have a master's degree. I have none of that. I'm just a simple person trying to read this as best as I can. I'm in the pursuit of truth. So I'm just a person trying to pursue truth. I want to know my God. So this would be, I guess, technically a bias, in my opinion, is that I claim the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as my God. I want to know that God, and I believe this is the most appropriate way to do so. So, education, I'll just be straightforward. I do have an associate's in science now, just recently acquired. I am pursuing a bachelor's in psychology currently, so I am being trained, but not inside of the theological framework, ordination, any of that quite yet, if that is the end goal in my life for what God has for me. But I am military trained, however, so I have some biases in there. I went through Air Force Basic. I did go to a specialized school called NAVSCOLIOD, which is for explosive ordnance disposal. Anybody that is in the military or is pursuing that probably knows what that is. I ended my career as a non-commissioned officer, so I was not an officer. I was just the enlisted type. So that is, as far as my education is concerned, what I am attempting to do is read the Bible. And it seems odd to have such a disclaimer, but I'm just trying to read through it. I'm trying to explore it. I'm trying to know it. So just read through it. That's the first part. But understand the difference between the two primary writings. Is one of them is the Septuagint and the Masoretic. So the typical, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, the typical one that we read in the Western society is a Masoretic form, and the one that is not read typically is the Septuagint. There are various arguments for and against. That's not my prerogative. I just want to see the difference. I really don't care personally about, I guess, the sacredness of the text. That it could be a conversation for another time. I'm just exploring. I don't think it's a negative thing to explore. In fact, if it were to be either one of them, to be my enemy, it is better to know my enemy than to be taken broadside. So That is why I'm reading both of those. I would like to just see the differences, see what they're saying, try to attempt to come at them with as a non-biased approach as I possibly can. So we'll move into the understand it better. I'm attempting to understand biblical readings. Some would call this a hermeneutic approach. This is it's a format in which you try to read exegetically inside of the text. It's a bunch of high-end words that I'm familiar with, but don't know the systems exactly well. So I'm going to do my best to read this in a way that I'm trying to come at it as best as I can. As a non-biased individual. I am, however, biased in certain formats, and I'm just trying to take account of those. But by reading Rashi's commentary, which, if I have this correct, about the 1040s, like AD 1040, there's a rabbi who made commentary who is highly regarded, which is his commentary. Rashi is not his name, from my understanding. It is a collection of his name into a smaller name, just for ease of reference, if I have all of this correctly. But however, he is regarded as one of the commentaries, so I'm trying to read it just to understand. I will actually add into this. I am reading the Rabbah, this Rabbah here from Sepharia. I'm exploring the Hebrew language. I am not at all going to claim at any point in this that I understand, speak, or even know the first thing about it. This is an exploration for myself outside of the Genesis portion that I just did, the chapter or the book of Genesis. That was a huge learning experience. I had to change things throughout the way. So know this is a living thing. So I am exploring how Hebrew is meant to convey concepts. Would be my way of saying that. Finally, and understanding it better is attempting an objective understanding. Though I understand the objections of an objective understanding, I'm not going to get into them. I'm just going to do the best to know my own biases and attempt to put them aside and read the text for what it's attempting to say. There are assumptions out there that if I read it, I'll come to some, aforementioned conclusions and presuppositions. I'm not into that. I just want to come to the text. I just want to read the text the best that I possibly can, understanding that I already have preconceived notions about certain things, but attempting to read it in such a way that I understand it in the way that it was meant to be given to me. So I know I'm gonna fail at these. It's the direction I'm aiming. It's not the thing. I can't guarantee a bullseye. No, God. The way I understand what the Bible is a set of revelations to man from its creator. The 50-cent word here, revelation, if you're not familiar with it, it's just a revealing of oneself. The who a person is revealed to another person. That's it. God is attempting to reveal who he is to man. That's what the Bible is. Plain and simple, as best as I can estimate. Some would call that like a presupposition, which goes against my, objectivity, and we could psychoanalyze and hyperanalyze all of the things that I'm proclaiming here. This is what I'm attempting to do. I know I keep on saying that, but I just want to make it extremely clear. Relationally, no, my God, I don't want to create presuppositions. I want it to be almost as if I'm approaching this thing to find out, say my wife wrote a book about herself and she wanted to tell me about herself. That's what I'm trying to read it as. What I'm not trying to do, I am not trying to make any dogmatic statement. Do not take anything I say as something that you now have to just... That's the only way that it is. Don't ever take it that way. This is no I am not trying to make some ideological statement about what the Bible is saying. This is just a man attempting to know his creator. That's it. I'm not... Take it or leave it. Some of it might be good. Some of it might be bad. I don't know. I hope that it's all good. I hope that even in the bad, like, great things can be learned. I'm also not trying to generate my own systematic. If you're not familiar with this, then don't worry about it. It's kind of in the same vein as a dogma. There have been many people that have written hundreds of thousands of pages and attempted to condense the Bible into a system, a systematic, a thing that this is how you read it, this is how you come to it, this is how you live it. I'm not attempting to do that. That is not my attempt. Plain and simple. Maybe there could be an argument to be said that I am. I hope not. That's all I can say. Imparting my own personal biases into the text. This is the hardest. And I'll actually highlight this one because this is a check on myself, right? This is almost like if I do this, you as an observer are free to comment on, hey, you said that you weren't going to do this. I will say it's probably going to happen. I'm attempting to be objective, not subjective, not read in, not take my own thoughts and put them into the text. I'm not trying to do that. It may happen. And the very first thing might be I think. I get that. I'm simply trying to understand it when I say I think. Well, this seems to me, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to understand it in a way that makes sense to me. Which obviously lends towards bias. I don't know what to do. But this is my disclaimer. I will fail at it. So there you go. So here we go. Start off here. Exodus 1. If you did not watch the Genesis one, I attempt to pronounce some of these names as best I can in the phonetics of the Hebrew. However, I did not grow up learning those phonetics, and there is a critical point in child development in which you don't know how to do those. So bear with me. Some of these may sound different than you are familiar with. Some of them might not be. For instance, Zebulun, there's Yishakar. Gad, typically pronounced, may sound like God because it's G-A-W-D in the phonetics. So anyways, I apologize if I butcher these. It's most likely going to happen. I was never, officially learned or taught in those, in that. So anyways, Exodus 1, one last disclaimer, and I apologize. I should have put this in there. I am doing this in the King James Version, not because I have any heartfelt reason. The Shabbat.org is not. The Septuagint is not. However, it runs into some copyright issues that I don't know exactly how to play around, and I haven't yet been told to not do what I'm doing. So until that time, I'm just going to read the plain text all the way through in King James Version, and don't take that as my seal of approval, I guess. So here we go. Israel multiplies in Egypt. Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man in his household came with Jacob. And Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yishakar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher, and all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph and Egypt was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, and all his brethren and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we are, or than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that, when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, and mortar, and in brick, and all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, When ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, see them upon the stools. If it be a son, then ye shall kill him, and put it be a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives, and said unto them, Why have ye done this, and have saved the men children alive? And the midwives said unto Pharaoh, Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. Therefore God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. And it came to pass, because the midwives feared God, that he made them houses. And Pharaoh charged all his people, saying, Every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. Little overview by me. Sometimes King James can be a little wordy and poetic, and it is my personal opinion. So it gives us these names of Israel. So it gives all the sons of Israel, and then it says Jacob was there, but he had 70 sons. 70. That's what this kind of is inferring here. Then, and Joseph died, and all his brethren, all that generation. Now, I'm not sure. Yeah, now Joseph died. We'll get to why I kind of pointed that out. So anyways, Joseph passes away, and all his brethren, and all that generation. So this generation has now passed. Well, sometimes in the biblical, and trying to, it sets up what is happening, and then it's going to tell you, and then it's going to set up again. It's just one of the writing styles of these books, especially the first 5. But it's setting up who was there, why should we care. So Joseph died; he's passed away, and all his brothers did. So there's still Israelites though, and so this new king over Egypt, or Pharaoh. There's some, we'll get to that in a minute, but there's some debate on what that means. They had a concern. It seems as if these children of Israel are becoming plentiful, and they're making us nervous. So we're going to put them under oppression. And then he makes an edict, after putting them under oppression, that the sons will not live after birth, and if the females are born and they live, they shall live. However, we see this: midwives feared God, and therefore they did not do what the king of Egypt was commanding them. And then from there, the midwives were blessed. There's multiple reasons for this blessing thing, and what that actually means. And then Pharaoh charges all his people, saying every son that is born, not just the Hebrew, all of them, shall be cast in the river. Now, this is specifically the Nile River, because in that time frame, the Nile was considered a deity, and so it was a sign of worship to said deity, which will come into play a little later. So we're going to hit the Chabad here. What I do, if you're new, is I will read the King James Version out of the Blue Letter Bible so that I can pull out any Hebrew or Aramaic, as it were, so that I can look at like the phonetics, but also I can look back on what exactly does that mean if you're curious about some of my processes. For instance, when I pronounce Yehuda, it is pronounced Ye, Hu, and Da. Now, if I clicked on this little button, it will give a little ping of a voice pronouncing like the phonetics of it. So I attempt to mimic that, but it's just a mimicry. Another piece to that is that if you're interested, you can connect any of the words here on the page to previous words to see how that word specifically is tied to other things. So if you were curious about this word bondage here, we could look at H5656, which is a Strong's Concordance number. There was a guy that referenced all of them, and I apologize if you already know this. You'll probably just want to skip ahead, but it will give you this. However, it will also give you each verse that word was associated to. So we can give some, ensure that there is credence to the accuracy of how the word is being used. But then there is in the Chabad, which is this chabad.org. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to use this, but I'm just kind of, going through it until somebody gets mad at me. But you have the Torah, which is the Pentateuch in our understanding, which the Torah pseudo means the law. You can kind of put it under that framework, but it means a little bit more like training for archery. And then you have the 5, which Genesis, Exodus, Shemot. And then here you can look at, the commentaries underneath of each verse here. And you can read it in Hebrew, but I just don't have that capability, so I just leave it in English. So here we are, verse 1. And these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. Each man in his household came. And these are the names of the sons of Israel. Although God counted them in their lifetime by their names, Genesis 46, 8 through 27, he counted them again after their death. Let us know how precious they are to him, because they were likened to the stars, which he takes out from beyond the horizon and brings in by number and by name, as it is said, who takes out their host by number, all of them he calls by name. Isaiah 40, 26. So it's just commenting that the reason why it lists them is because God himself finds these individuals precious in his sight, which are likened to the stars. And that means that they reside continuously. And so that these names will be, throughout history as we read them, known. Verse 5 here. Now all those descended from Jacob were 70 souls, and Joseph, who was in Egypt. Who was in Egypt. Now, were not he and his sons included in the 70? What then does this teach us? Did we not know that he was in Egypt? But this clause comes in to inform you of Joseph's righteousness. He, the Joseph who tended his father's flocks, is the same Joseph who was in Egypt and became a king, and he retained his righteousness. What it's doing is linking him to Genesis, Jacob, so we know who this is. Essentially, is kind of what it's also imparting a few other things, a little more. I don't know if I want to say deification of Joseph. I think that would be a little bit strawmanny of me to do something like that. But they do consider, Joseph is a very high, respectful person within inside of the framework. So, verse 7 here: the children of Israel were fruitful and swarmed and increased and became very, very strong, and the land became filled with them. Swarmed. They bore 6 children each birth. So there's some mathematics. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It starts with a G, but anyways, sometimes what they'll do is they'll add each letter in the Hebrew is equated to a number, and sometimes they'll do like these additional things. But then there's also like conjugations. If there's like multiple conjugations, like if there's like this word has 2 conjugations, this word has 2 conjugations, and it's going down the line, they'll do a mathematical thing in which here is the 6 children at each birth. That's how they're coming up with that number. There's also it goes into the in the Rabbah, it goes way into the weeds to a point where it says that some were giving 60 children, some were 70, the general ideal was 60, so on and so forth. So there is also debate inside of the the text on what exactly that meant. Verse 8 here, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know about Joseph. And this is actually the first moment where we see a little bit of controversy in Exodus here. A new king arose, Rav and Shamuel. One says he was really new, and the other one says his decrees were new. Since the Torah does not say the king of Egypt died and a new king arose, it implies the old king was still alive, only that his policies had changed and he acted like a new king. So the implication here is because it said, now Joseph died, as well as all his brothers, but it never says that the king of Egypt or Pharaoh did, then he's still alive. However, if we look at it and go, a new king arose, that one could just go, well, yeah, he surpassed the old one. However that happened, who knows? So there is an argument of, no, it was still the old king, he acted like a new king, and then there's other ones that say, it's just a new guy. So there's arguments for both sides of that. The one that I think requires more argumentation, I believe, if I read the Rabbah right, is the one that says his decrees were new. I think that one's the one that has a little bit less strength to it, I guess. And who did not know? I apologize. And I thought to myself, I was going to remind myself to mute my phone, but once again, I find myself not remembering things. So I apologize. And who did not know? Who did not know about Joseph? He acted as if he did not know about him. So this acted here is kind of what I was saying. If they were to say that he had new decrees and he acted as if Joseph never existed, he didn't know about him. So there's a debate back and forth. Verse 10 here, get ready, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they increase and a war befall us, and they join our enemies and wage war against us and depart from the land. Get ready, let us deal shrewdly with them. This here, the Hebrew, every one of these found in the Torah is an expression of preparation and readiness. Gird thyself, telling you so. You get prepared. So let us deal shrewdly with them, with the people of Israel, that is. Let us act shrewdly regarding what to do with them. Our rabbis, however, interpreted that Pharaoh said, let us deal shrewdly with the Savior of Israel, thus interpreting this word as to him by afflicting them to die with water, for he has already sworn that he would not bring a flood to the world. But they, the Egyptians, did not understand that upon the whole world he would not bring a flood, but he would bring it upon one nation in an old Rashi manuscript from Soda 11 Alpha. Okay, this is an inference, or it's referring back to the fact that God promised that he wouldn't flood the whole world. And so they were like, well, he won't do anything if we, drown them. Failing to understand that doesn't mean the whole world, doesn't mean that he won't cause local things to happen. However, there's another part that has to be dealt with here, is that they're saying that the wise men of the Egyptians said that there was going to be a savior that was going to bring them out of that land. So this depart from the land part. So they say that the way it's interpreted is that was what was going on here. So to let us deal shrewdly with them, meaning my wise men have said something about someone who's going to come and save them. Therefore, we should do something about it because we're benefiting from them, is one way of looking at it. There's also the way of looking at it as we're going to use them as a sacrificial thing to our own deity. And the deity of the Hebrews was like, nah, that's not happening. That's kind of like where this begins to pull apart a little bit. And depart from the land against our wills. Our rabbi, however, depicted Pharaoh as a person who curses himself but ascribes his curse to others. And it is as if it were written, and we will depart from the land and they will take possession of it. So another way of reading that, I guess, and I might have this wrong here, is that they're saying that the Egyptians would depart the land and that the Hebrews would take the land. However, this part here, as a person who curses himself, is an interesting concept because, and this is where I'm going to kind of like peel off from the whole Rashi commentary. This is my own. I personally see, because one thing we do know is that the Egyptians worshipped another god and the Israelites worshipped a different god. That is pretty typical and plain in the text biblically, is that the God of the Israelites versus the other things, whatever that might be. So we see here that if Pharaoh is going to, drop them into the Nile, that he may be worshiping the god of the Nile. And so if our God was to just let that happen, what would we say? This is a common kind of trope with inside of the Rabbah texts. It's like, if something happened, then what would they say about this God? So he's almost anticipating this by what's going on, but at the same time, that we might be able to read the fact that they're worshiping their gods in their own way. This is kind of like how the Egyptians viewed the Israelites as an abomination because one of their gods was considered was related to a sheep or a ram, and it was wrong for people to herd them because that would mean controlling the gods. Was kind of a thought that could be imparted. So anyways, verse 11 here. So they appointed over them tax collectors to afflict them with their burdens, and they built store cities for Pharaoh, namely Pithom and Ramses. There's in the Septuagint, it adds an on. I don't know what that is, but it does add that. So I don't know how that adds anything to the text. So it's not a big deal to me. It is another place that I guess they were commanded to build, so maybe there was something to do with that third thing. No idea. It is a non-starter for me, I guess. So they appointed over them tax collectors to afflict them. Over them, so over the people. Tax collectors, the Hebrew here is literal tax officers, denotes an expression of tax. Officers who collect the tax from them. Now, what was the tax? That they built store cities for Pharaoh. So think in the time, currency may not be the way that we think about it now. So one's work could technically be considered their value, their asset that they can give. Not going to get too deep into this, but basically it's because I look at money as just a placeholder for my time. My time is equated by a value in which I can exchange for something else. It's just a falsely misplaced concretism of my ability to work doing something else. It's a representation, not the thing. So therefore, those that were working were actually paying with their work, is the way to think about that. To afflict them with their burdens, with the burdens of the Egyptians. So whatever the Egyptians needed, they would just make the Israelites do it. Store cities, as the Targum renders, cities of storehouses, and similarly come to the treasurer in Isaiah 22:15, to the treasurer appointed over the storehouse. So the same phrasing is found here. So this is store cities or treasuries or places in which things could be stored. Is what they built. Pithom and Ramses, which were originally unfit for this, and they strengthened them and fortified them for storage. So I guess there might be a historical thing that is being brought into this about how they were actually still there, or they were originally there, and they had to fortify them. So something along those lines. Now, there is something, I'm not sure if it goes into this quite yet. I don't remember, but I do remember in the Rava that the way that this is phrased, this word them, so they appointed over them, is technically singular. So some of them will write it as, so they appointed over it tax collectors to afflict it with its burdens. And it built storehouses for Pharaoh, namely Pithom and Ramses. Now, it might not be it here. That might be the Egyptians, so it wasn't it. Anyways, the point here is that there's some concept of like conceptually looking at it as a singular thing. So like almost as if the people of Israel were one entity. But that might also be that, if I remember correctly, and I have it right, is that they were afflicting the God of Israel. That's another way, if I understood it correctly, to be read that way. But that's not how it's written here. It is translated as they appointed over them tax collectors to afflict them with their burdens, and it may strictly be a English thing that in that particular language it could be conceived as them or their. So anyways, moving to verse 12 here. But as much as they would afflict them, so did they multiply, and so did they gain strength, and they were disgusted because of the children of Israel. But as much as they would afflict them, in whatever way they set their heart to afflict them, so was the heart of the Holy One, blessed be He, to multiply them and to strengthen them. Yeah, so we start to see this, we'll call it a juxtaposition or a dichotomy here. We have two things going on. We have a will of something, and then a will of something else. Which one is going to win out? And if the will of God did not intervene here, then it would have just been seen as, well, see, their God's not very strong. But it doesn't. So the Holy One, blessed be He, to multiply them. So this, we'll get to this here in a second, but it's in a really long block. So I'll just wait for it. So did they multiply? So did they gain strength? So the literal, so will they multiply and so will they gain strength? It means, however, so did they multiply and so did they gain strength? So saying like a grammatical thing, it reads as literally this, so will they multiply and so will they gain strength, almost like a current time thing, but it actually means did they, as in a past reference. Its midrashic interpretation is, however, the Holy Spirit says this, you, Pharaoh, say, lest they multiply, but I say, so will they multiply. Right. So in that time frame, it's a response to the thing that was going on, but we're going to visualize it as a past thing. And they were disgusted. They were disgusted with their lives. So here we once again see this concept of abomination. They were considered an abomination to them. I know that that's not the word, but it's at the very end of Genesis. In the chapter reading and commentary, I kind of go over that. But anyways, and they were disgusted. They were disgusted with their lives. Others explain, and the Egyptians were disgusted with themselves, and it is easy to understand why. Our rabbis, however, interpreted it to mean that they, Israelites, were like thorns in their eyes. It's very interesting framing. I mean, if we look forward into the Bible, we see things like thorn in the side. I've never heard thorn in the eyes. That might be something that recurs somewhere else, but they considered it a terrible thing, is I guess what it's trying to explain. So verse 13 here, so the Egyptians enslaved the children of Israel with back-breaking labor. With hard labor that literally crushes the body and breaks it, is what's supposed to be, received here. One of the things that I read in the Rava, and this was a really strange, I'm not sure exactly how to put it all into a short framework, is that Pharaoh wore a brick-making mold around his neck to show that he was able to do so, and therefore the Israelites, when they said, but we're too fragile, they would say, but is Pharaoh too fragile? As an argumentative thing to get them to do what they were going to do. But this whole thing is kind of predicated around this concept of a brick mold at the time frame, and that things were done with this brick mold is one of the afflictions that were put on them. Don't know about the whole Pharaoh wearing a brick mold. It's a curious, story motif piece, but we'll move on here. So backbreaking labors, verse 15 here. Now the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one who was named Shiphrah, and the second who was named Puah. To the midwives, this is an expression similar, meaning causing to give birth, but there is a light form and there is a heavy form. So one is strong, one is weak, would be another kind of way of looking at that. Breaks, shatters, says, speaks. So are these two. Rashi clarifies the Hebrew conjugations. Conjugations, yeah. Those that have a dagash and the second root letter and those that do not. Of the 7 conjugations, 3 have a dagesh and 4 do not. Since it is more difficult to pronounce the letters with the dagesh, those conjugations are referred to as the heavy form, and those with the dagesh are referred to as the light. So one of the things I do know is, and I'll cover this a little bit more later on, but the little dots and lines and annotations that are above the letters there, that's what this dagesh is referring to. And if I'm reading it correctly, I think, let's see here. Conjugations, those that have a dagash. So I believe it's this line here, but I could be wrong, is what it's talking about of the 7 conjugations here. Anyways, all of that just to mean that they were the ones that assisted in giving birth. I know that might seem kind of like, why did we just go into that? But Shiphrah was Jochebed, called Shiphrah because she was beautiful, the newborn infant. The Rava went into a very long iteration of what Shiphrah and Puah did. For instance, Shiphrah was there when the child was extremely bloody. Puah was there, and something about giving infants wine and such. I'm not really sure, but there was a lot going on. The one thing I do see is that Puah is referencing Miriam. So Miriam and Aaron are key characters in the Exodus story here because she cried. So yeah, she was given the name Puah because she would coo at the babies a lot of the time and talked and cooed to the newborn infant in the manner of the women who soothe a crying infant. So this is in reference to that as an expression of crying out, similar to like a traveling woman will I cry in Isaiah 42:14. Rashi on Sota 11b explains that she played with the infant to soothe and amuse him. So we get this concept of Miriam is that which soothes the crying baby. Shiphrah is this beautiful individual, but in the Rava, it actually kind of infers that it didn't mean she was. It was that she beautified the infants. Not sure what that is, but I would say cleaned up would probably be what that meant, in my estimation. Could be way off. Maybe it's, dolled up and given makeup and stuff, but I would just assume that meant she cleaned them. Verse 16 here, and he said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, and you see on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall put him to death, but if it is a daughter, she may live. When you deliver, so it's just referring to giving birth. When you deliver and on the birth stool, the seed of the woman in childbirth, but elsewhere Isaiah 37:3 is called this. Similar to this, we find who does work in Jeremiah 18:3, the seat, place of the tools of the potter. So this may seem kind of strange, but in the Rava, it kind of like extrapolates a little bit. The imagery here is a stone place in which pottery is made, and you would place your legs on both sides of them, and the pot would be birthed by the potter. So the place of the tools of the potter is there on that stone. So when a child was birthed into the world, it was almost considered a pot being birthed into the world. So that's where this framing is coming from, to make it seem a little bit more like, what is this? Now, I mean, we could just reference this as just the place in which somebody, sits when they birth, but that was the imagery that's kind of like coming through in the Hebrew here, from what I can get. In this, she may live, it's actually meaning like if the child does live, she can live. That's kind of the implication. But if it's a son, it's just going to be gone. Now, there is a lot of discussion on, maybe not a lot, that might be a wrong phrase. There was discussion on the fact that it was foolish for Pharaoh to do this because if you kill the sons but you have the women can reproduce faster than having more sons than having less women. So it came down to the fact that they think that the Egyptians wanted to marry the Israeli women or the Hebrew women. That was kind of what I got out of it. Verse 17, the midwives, however, feared God, so they did not do as the king of Egypt had spoken to them, but they enabled the boys to live. All right, so this massive block of text here. The first part of it is that they provided water and food for them. The first is translated here, and they enabled to live. And the second, you enabled to live, because in Hebrew, for the feminine plural, this word and others like it are used as the third person past tense and the second person past tense. Example is, and they said, an Egyptian man in Exodus 2:19, the past tense. Like this, for the masculine plural, you have spoken, with your Jeremiah 44:25, an expression like the equivalent of for masculine plural. Similarly, you have profaned, me before my people in Ezekiel 13:19, the past tense, an expression like the equivalent for the masculine plural. So if you can read these words, I just skipped the words, so it may seem a little disjointed here, but if it were necessary to supply the infants with food, there's a large bracketed here. Let's see where that ends. Further, the particularly sustain the male child. So I'll just explain it. So it's saying that what the midwives were doing previously is what they continued to do. So the midwives feared God, so they did not do as Pharaoh had spoken to them, but they enabled the boys to live. They provided. They gave sustenance to them. Therefore, since the future form of the feminine plural, both in the second person and the third person are identical, the same is true for the past forms with a converse vav in Aramaic. However, since there is no converse vav, the two past forms are different. So, what they did was what they were going to do, and what they were doing were what they were going to do. So, I know that seems really silly, but what it's attempting to say, they didn't stop attempting to keep the child from passing. In the Rava, it talks about how rich individuals would give to the midwives to provide for the poor so that their children didn't pass. Water and food. But there's also another concept that was going on, that if a child was born maimed on death's doorstep, the midwives could be blamed for the state of the boys. So think about it like this. There's an edict that comes out, you're going to go kill the boys that are born. Midwives go, no. So they don't. But let's just say one of them did die or pass. What would the rest of the Israelites do? Would they not look at the midwives and go, what have you done? So what they would do is they particularly sustain the male children lest one die and they be suspected of being responsible for the death. They would legitimately pray that the Holy Spirit would come and save the child, and they did, and it did. So the Holy Spirit did save these children. That's what's being implied here, is this concept of they sustain the children at all costs. That's what's going on. So if we wanted to take that as how do we fear God in moments of something else speaking against God? We have to ask ourselves, what has God done that we should respect him? Well, God creates people. Why should I respect the king of Egypt over the one that actually creates the child? And so they respected or feared God. That's another form of feared God, is they respected God over the king of Egypt. And they did everything at cost to save the thing that God created. In current vernacular, that might be, if you know something might happen to something God is going to create, we should do everything at all costs to save it. Take that as you will, but if we really kind of want to get to brass tacks, and if you're not reading between the lines here, the king of Egypt is the governance of Egypt. God is the governance of those who follow God. God is the one that creates. The governance of Egypt is not. Which one do we respect, or in other words, fear? What shall we do about that? Enable them to live. So, do with that as you will. It's a call out to myself. So, hey, verse 19, that's the whole point of reading this. Verse 19, and the midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are skilled as midwives. When the midwife has not yet come to them, they have already given birth. Okay, so there is I even read this initially and I was like, this seems improper. So you have the king of Egypt, or Pharaoh, summons the midwives. Why have you done this thing that you have enabled the boys to live? They respond, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, they are skilled as midwives. When the midwife has not yet come to them, they have already given birth. This almost seems like a lie. In English, we read it as a lie because we don't understand what's actually being said here. Our women are not like your women means you look at our women as such, not like your women. Our women are animals in your view. So, for they are skilled as midwives. This phrase here, as skillful as midwives, actually means how I interpreted it to mean that the Israelite women, are compared to beasts of the field, which do not require midwives, nor where are they compared to beasts. Well, it's asking the question, now where are they compared to as beasts? Genesis 49, 9, 49, 27, Deuteronomy 33, 17, Genesis 49, 21. What it's saying here is, in these Genesis ones, is when they claim a cub and a grown lion, a wolf he will prey, his firstborn bull, Deuteronomy 33, 17, and as swift as a gazelle. These names are actually names for the sons of Yitzhak, right? They're equated to, at the very end, the chapter before Genesis closes, they're equated to animals. So what this is saying here, in a roundabout way, is that you look at our women as animals, that they basically, birth things out in the field. They're not like the Egyptian women that require, midwives, for they're skilled as midwives. They can give birth without a midwife, like in a beast in the field. That's if you can get that kind of imagery now in your head. So it's maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm not sure. One, you could still see this as like they weren't being entirely truthful, or maybe, and possibly, that they, being Hebrew women, looked at them and said, we're not going to be there for the birth, but we'll come in afterwards. Right? Which still begs a question of like, well, when do you determine it's a boy or a girl? And the Rama gets into this a lot about how the boys were born in one orientation and the girls were born in another orientation, and this was all because of the rib taken. So it gets into some really fanciful things, I'll say that. But there are reasons for them. I'm not going to try to argue them. I'm just going to say I'm not sure I agree. Verse 20 here, God benefited the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. So the Hebrew here bestowed goodness upon them. So here's where we get into the annotations of Hebrew become complicated. Handwritten Hebrew, from my understanding, is not this particular format. But in some formats, like when they wrote it down, they would annotate it with these dots and these markings, right? So the markings below the letters were not always there. In fact, if I have it correctly, they're not actually taught initially when learning how to write Hebrew. And I could be way, way off on this, but from my understanding, this is going to go into vavs and yuds. This letter right here is a vav. And when it's vowelized, or yud, yuds are these little tiny annotations here. The vav is the first thing. So when it is used in the causative sense, meaning God benefited the midwives, this is a proactive thing. This is a causative sense. This is a thing that came to be because God was being active, causative in the thing. There will be a yud and is vowelized with a series, with a ziri, which is a kamatz katan, or with a sigul, which is a patak katan. God benefited the midwives, so it is annotating these little dots in the line here, and he increased. Notice how there's a difference. And the daughter of Judah, and Lamentations 2:5, he increased pain and he exiled. There's a different annotation. The survivors in 2 Chronicles 36:20, referring to Nebuzaradan, he exiled the survivors and he turned. Another different annotation, a little bit more like this annotation, but it has a different patterning with the 3. So if you can start to identify that, if you're not watching, the vav is a long-armed thing that kind of looks like it almost looks like a handle with a little tiny painting brush at the end. The yud is just the painting brush end. Each one have a different marking at the bottom of them, like 3 dots in a triangle or a line. And each one of these, what this is doing is meaning a causative or a passiveness, meaning or permissiveness. One is saying that God actually caused this particular thing to happen. God caused benefit to the midwives. But if it wasn't there, then it would be permitted the benefit of the midwives. Here, it is a causative form. Other chapters or other verses, other moments of this word are passive or permissively allowing these things to happen. So here, it's simply saying that in this moment, God causatively benefited the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very strong. Now, then it goes into, what does that mean, God benefited the midwives? There's multiple reasons. One, the most logical, is that, like I said before, the boys who were born did not pass. So their people didn't turn on them. That's the first one. Second one, well, and if that did happen, God worked in the hearts of those individuals that their child did pass in such a way that they didn't come after the midwives. Notice how the midwives are still there. They're not gone. So there's one. Second one, when Pharaoh came back to them, he's going to look at them and go, why did you do this? Who has the authority and the governance to basically make them no longer be in the governance sense? Well, Pharaoh. He has that ability. They're still there. Then there's next. He benefited them in the sense that the people of Israel multiplied, not just multiplied, became strong under oppression, under the fact that he was wanting to curtail their procreation. So there's multiple benefits in this moment. It's not just, and it goes into that in the Rava where there's like, it's meaning more than just one thing. Verse 21 here. Now it took place when the midwives feared God that he made houses for them. He made houses for them, the houses of the priesthood, the Levitic family, and the royal family, which are called houses, as it is written. And he built the house of the Lord and the house of the king, 1 Kings 9:1, the priesthood and the Levitic family from Jochebed, and the royal family from Miriam, as is stated in Tractate Sota 11 Bravo. I'm just going to, at this moment, say agree to disagree. I think this means something along the lines of places that they can live. However, there is reason to believe that there are other things that may have come about. Not my place, I guess. I'm struggling on whether I should continue with my thought or not. I'll just leave it as that. I'm not an authority. We'll just leave it. Don't take what I have to say as dogmatic. Verse 22. And Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you shall cast into the Nile, and every daughter you shall allow to live. All his people. He issued this decree upon them all. This was not just just for the Israelites. On the day Moses was born, his astrologers told Pharaoh, today the one who will save them has been born, but we do not know whether from the Egyptians or from the Israelites. But we see that he will ultimately be smitten through water. Therefore, on that day he issued a decree also upon the Egyptians, as it is said, every son who is born, and it does not say who is born to the Hebrews. They did not know, however, that he, Moses, was ultimately suffer because of the water of Meribah, Numbers 27 through 13, that he would not be permitted to enter the Holy Land. Oops. Not what I intended to do there. So, as I said before, there's a way to look at this in which they see it that Pharaoh's wise men essentially had, or his astrologers essentially had told him that there's going to be a person that saves them from your actions. That's very possible. I mean, it aligns with many other, motifs or tropes that go throughout the Bible. However, it's not set here in my estimation. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, would be the thing. Because, like I was saying, the Nile is maybe not the way that we assume that they thought as a deity, but it was considered something that was significant in which they should appease. And that might be something that, was going on. The astrologers of Pharaoh were concerned about the Nile. They were concerned about these people. Maybe our God is weakening. I'm not sure. That's a lot of, I think postulates would be the appropriate word. A lot of assumptions that I could make. Anyways, hopefully this was good for you. I'm going to try to keep this up daily. I can't guarantee anything. Sometimes with my studies and everything, it takes a good chunk of my time every day. So if you've watched this to the end, maybe keep me in your prayer just a little bit so that God strengthens me. It is quite a lot if this is what I'm meant to do. But I will leave you guys. I hope this blessed you, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.